Hi and welcome back to Driver 88. Today we've got another review for you, and it is another Cupra, a brand that has not long been in Australia but is proving to be very popular. This is the larger Ateca. It is the SUV that is trying to be the most car for the most people. We're going to go through all the stats and specs, we're going to take it for a drive and then give you a bit of a verdict at the end. So, as much as I don't really want to use the SUV words, essentially this is the sort of car which has taken over the family wagon and sedan, and it is relatively good looking. I think the silhouette is very familiar to most people. It's really not a bad looking car. It sits on relatively large 19-inch rims, it's got lots of space, and the looks, well, I'll leave it up to you whether you think it looks good or not. This car starts at $66,750, I believe, and there's just a few options to choose from. And it's pretty much cross-shopped against a Tiguan R, maybe a base level GLC or X3 sort of vehicle. But let's go and have a look at the rest of the options on this thing. Okay, some options and price. Now this one is of course in the plain Jane white, but you get very, very few color choices with the Ateca. You can have it in black or a few different variations of the dark sort of earthy silvers that Cupra offer. You've only got 3 different options on top of that. So our Brembo brakes, which are a $4,000 upgrade. You've also got an $1,800 sunroof, which is something that I would probably pick. You've also got the more expensive $6,000 the Krapovic exhaust, which have larger tips from memory and look pretty cool. So just those 3 options and just maybe half a dozen colors to choose from. You can choose a matte color as well. Let's talk about performance of the Ateca. Even though this is pretty much a family car, you've got no short of performance. 221 kilowatts, 400 newton meters from a very familiar EA888 Gen 4 engine. It's the same engine that sits in the Formentor and my car, the Leon. 0 to 100 turns up in 4.9 seconds, which for a car which sits at 1700 thereabout curb weight kilograms, that is pretty fast with a launch control, which we may do later. 7-speed DSG, you've got a whole bunch of modes, including your Cupra mode. We'll try those out in a minute, but performance is certainly decent for a mid-size SUV. One of the most important features of the Ateca, 480 litres of space in the rear, which is slightly less than the Tiguan, but as you can see, more than ample. The thing I like about this, and I must be showing my age, is how low the base sits, so it's quite easy to put in your shopping and things like that. We've also got a space saver spare, and these seats fold down as well. Let's get into the back of the car. So very easy to get into. Petrol blue, just like my Leon, leather all across the front and rear, which is quite nice. Very comfortable sitting position on 5'11". I've got heaps of headroom, heaps of knee room. These seats are relatively contoured enough to not be uncomfortable over a decent trip. We've got 2 Type-C ports and air conditioning in the rear, and that is pretty much it. We've got decent storage in this side, bins here, which should be able to hold your litre bottle. You've got 2 cup holders in the front here, and pretty small central console. You've got wireless charging as well as wireless Android Auto and wireless Apple CarPlay, so I don't think you're missing out on any of those tech features at all for the money in this segment. Into the Ateca, first thing that I thought is it's really nice and easy to get in and out of this car, and performance I found to be quite surprising. There's a lot of power on tap. It's quite responsive even in your standard mode, and speaking of modes, this car does have a snow and off-road mode, which I couldn't imagine too many people would be using. Maybe, I guess some people would take this to the snow. You'll notice that this does have roof racks, and I don't know how many people would be taking this car off-road, but at least the option is there for you. As I said, the performance is quite solid. Overtaking on the freeway is really easy, even in the slowest mode. 7.8 litres per 100 kilometres is the claimed fuel consumption. I don't think you're gonna get anywhere near that. Over the time that we've had this car, we've got closer to 10. Maybe if you're on the freeway all the time, you might get into the 8s, but given the size and weight of this car, I don't think that you'll be expecting really, really low fuel consumption, but I don't think that's a big issue in this case. Handles corners relatively well. The steering is, well, it's very, very assisted, but it's good enough. The steering wheel's nice and sporty and small in your hands. Given the size of this car, the performance just overall, the handling ability, it really does surprise me compared to the looks of the thing. Put your foot down and there's lots of torque in the mid-range. If you want to, you can always drop the gears and keep yourself in the meat of that torque band, because we do only have a 2-litre engine, so you need to get the revs up there to get that power. One last thing about this car, the suspension settings, it doesn't handle the bumps as well as I'd probably like in the softer setting, but this is the VZX model, so this is the sportiest variant. There is also a hybrid variant you could go for. Just in case you want to race another dad at the lights, or mum, we're going to do a bit of a launch. Now with the Cupras, you have to turn traction control all the way off. You can't do it in sport like other VAG products. Don't ask me why. At least the button is right in front of you. So I'm going to hold that down now. ESC and everything else is off, and then we can do a launch. That's enough performance for the school run. I think this is going to suit a lot of people where they like a little bit of a sporty drive from now and again, and sitting in traffic is perfectly comfortable. I've noticed that this is really, really quiet on the freeway as well. So now that we've taken this thing for a drive, let's end with a verdict. So whilst we've mostly been impressed with the Ateca whilst driving it, there are a few things that we don't particularly like. One is the central infotainment screen. It's decent, it's quite clear, but it does sort of struggle to react quickly at times. It's not as fast as I think most modern screens should be today. The other one is that there are a few sort of pieces of switchgear down here that feel a little bit cheap. The steering wheel is still good though. The other thing that I'm not a big fan of, which is just a small gripe, is when you get out of the car and it's on, it seems to bong and make all these noises which are a little bit annoying. And the last thing that I think, which is just a little bit of a gripe, I understand that this is the sportiest Ateca, being the VZX model, but even in the softest setting, it does feel quite hard, and the dampening is not that composed. So that was our review of the new Cupra Ateca. If you're after a relatively premium crossover that ticks lots of different boxes, I would certainly shortlist this car. If you'd like to, please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.